Hi, everyone. My name is Teresa. I have a farm outside of Northfield, Minnesota. I raise sheep and I have a wool mill, and that's what you see me here at. Today, I want to talk about a couple of delightful yarns that I've been working on. These happen to be my CSA shares from January and now February. And so we're going to go into those two different things. This is my first time doing a vlog. I've been thinking about it for a while. I know a lot about sheep and I tend to ramble on. If you've met me anywhere or you've seen me or you see me in the future and you just say like, hey, tell me about this sheep, I will go on and on and on about that sheep. And you might want to escape, which is totally understandable because it can be a bit much. But anyway, so today we're going to talk about two different yarns. We're going to talk about yarn number one, which is a Rambouillet and Cheviot blend. Absolutely delightful. Should have done it sooner, but did it now. And my Icelandic blend, which I absolutely love. I've done it a bunch of times before. I fiddled with the percentages of each of the blend, which I won't tell you what they are because that's kind of my trade secret. But I fiddled with it, and now I think I'm at the point that I love it. My sweater is made out of my Icelandic blend, and we'll talk about why I love this blend and what I'm knitting with this blend and all that other great stuff. So hang on, let's talk about sheep. Anyway, so I thought what we would start with is this delightful blend. I had an idea a while ago to make something that was strong and soft. So we're going to go over the two different locks that make this yarn. The Rambouillet that is inside of this yarn comes from a friend just down the road here in Northfield, Minnesota. They own a business called Cannon Valley Grazers. So they take their beautiful Rambouillet sheep and they graze them under solar panels, which is amazing. These sheep get to travel all over the place and they graze throughout the year because they're moving around. I was lucky enough last year to buy 4 of their bales and I paid them above market value, which is really important to me. I love fine wools, but I have a love-hate relationship with them because they're so soft and so squishy, but they pill so much, and I'm really rough on my stuff. So I wanted to take the beauty of this fine wool and blend it with something that gave it a little bit more strength. And I've done some Rambouillet blends where I've added in Surrey alpaca, which is just dreamy, and I'll be making that yarn again soon. Silk, I've done silk in it, but I've never taken a fine wool and combined it with a medium grade wool. So let's talk about Rambouillet sheep.
Here we have a couple examples of a Rambouillet lock. You can see that the lock has a pointed tip to it, which makes it really nice to spin. And also the lock and the crimp is a little bit more disorganized, which means it has more loft and elasticity. The micron on this fiber is between 18 and 24. Sometimes here in the States we find that they're closer to the 20 and 19 microns. So it can lay kind of in the middle of a fine and medium grade wool. The staple length is typically between 2 and 4 inches. I've seen it as long as 6, which is a bit much. The fleeces are, roughly around 10 to 18 pounds. I think 10 is about the average, and they're pretty high grease, so you do find that they have a lot of loss in weight when they are washed. Because a Rambouillet sits in the fine wool category, specifically in the merino family, you will find some luster to it. It's not quite as shiny as a merino lock would be, but I really love Rambouillet just because it's the base bone and backbone of most of our American sheep breeds. Next up is the Cheviot lock. So Cheviot sheep are pretty common here in Minnesota. They are a lively, fun sheep, very leggy. They come from the Cheviot Hills in the UK originally and were imported a number of years ago. I believe it was in 1838 from Scotland. Their fleece weighs typically between 5 and 10 pounds, so a little bit less than those Rambouillets. They tend to have less wool, less grease in them, so you have like more of that weight after washing. Their staple length is between 4 and 5 inches long, so they are a little bit longer, but some can be up to 7 inches. Their micron is between 27 and 33. So that tells you that they really do sit in that medium to coarse wool area of the micron count. They have this really great rectangular, slightly pointed tip to their locks, and they have a 3-dimensional crimp. It is very bold and uniform from the bottom of the lock to the tip of the lock, and they really have no kemp or other kind of primitive pieces to their fiber. It's a really great wool. It tends to be very durable. It's really hard to felt. So it really added to this blend, giving some strength and some durability to that Rambouillet. And what you see here is a colored fleece. We had Cheviots on the farm for a number of years, and we specifically bred the colored Cheviot sheep. And here is my knitted sample. You can see that beautiful colored Cheviot really brought out some lovely color in the knitted sample. It was a delight to knit, and I'll talk about that more in a second.
Okay, so here's my knitted version. Okay, so you got to see the bigger up close picture of my knitted version. I really love this because look at this elasticity and this stretch. So with a woolen spun yarn, you're going to always have your growth kind of like on the sides versus up and down, which is more common with a worsted style spun yarn. Mine stuff is all woolen, but it's got this great stretch. And I like my garments to be pretty lightweight because I'm not a very big person and I don't want 20 pounds of wool on me. So I tend to knit with a loose open gauge because I know that my woolen style yarns will fill in those spots. So what I end up having is a lightweight, super warm garment because it's woolen spun. I just love the gray color of this yarn too. It's just really fun and very bouncy. So that I am wearing my Icelandic right now. In my flock, I have a lot of black Icelandic sheep. So I tend to go towards blacks and grays, but sometimes you need a little color. And if you've ever worked with Icelandic, you know that Icelandic loves dye and it takes it really vibrantly. So let's talk about the fiber of Icelandic sheep.
Here's an example of an Icelandic lock. We started our farm with Icelandic sheep, and they tend to be very popular in our region. The Icelandic fleece typically weighs between 4 and 7 pounds, so much different than the other fleeces that I talked about earlier. They are pretty light in lanolin, so you get a high yield off of the washing after you wash it. They have 2 coats to them. They have an outer coat, which is the tog, and that is 27 to 31 microns. So that's really telling you that it's a very coarse wool. And then it has this downy undercoat, which typically is between 19 and 22 microns, which if we remember back to the Rambouillet, that's very similar. So you have a little bit of a coarse wool and a fine wool put together. Here I pulled the 2 pieces apart so you can see that downy undercoat and that longer outer coat. And here is an example of that commercial Rambouillet that many of us mills purchase in large bumps. These bumps are about 100 pounds maybe. As you can see, it's vastly different than the Rambouillet I showed you earlier. It still is crimpy, but that crimp is a little bit more uniform just through the processing of the fiber. When I add that to this blend, it really lends to giving it some air, but also keeping it nice and smooth and flat. And here we have the alpaca that I add to this blend. This is specifically Wakaya alpaca. The Wakaya, there are 2 different types of alpaca. There's Surrey and Wakaya. You can find Wakaya all over the United States, and Surrey tends to be a little bit harder, but I have a couple good connections. Typically, the fleece weight on a wakaya is between 2 to 6 pounds, sometimes 12 pounds. It really depends on the animal and the farmer that you're getting it from. The staple length on wakaya is between 2 and 6 inches, and then it is about that 15 to 35 microns. I tend to find stuff that is right in the middle at around 20 microns. I don't usually ask my alpaca farmers to test their microns, but I do look for guard hairs inside of the fiber. So if there's a lot of guard hairs, I usually don't buy that. Wakaya is overall fluffy. It's very nice and sleek and dense. It has like a crimp-like profile in the individual fibers, and it is just a nice silky addition to this blend. So I add those 3 things in, and I always add them in at the picker. And my picker is the thing with the box fan above it. I use that box fan to help pull air out. So as the stuff is going into the picker box, air is being pulled out and it's dumping in there. And another video I can actually show what each of the machines do. The picker actually came in the box, which I think is kind of fun, that I have the picker and the box it came in, and I use them both. So I do the majority of my blending over there on my picker, and then the final blending here on my carder. I don't do any blending after that. So I don't blend in my draw frame or during the drawing of the fiber, because I'm trying to go for a woolen spun yarn. And in order for me to get that, I really need my fibers to be the least processed as possible, so that all my fibers are going in opposite directions and they're not super aligned. The more aligned they are, the more smooth and slick and worsted your yarn is going to be. So with adding these 3 components, what I end up getting is an Icelandic yarn that has a lot of air. It's got a lot of softness and like a silky texture when you touch it. As opposed to like that toothy bite. It still is water resistant, like it sheds the water. It's still super warm. It fills in all these great spaces, but it doesn't have as much of that bite and takes dye delightfully. So with my Icelandic right now, I am knitting the halibut cardigan by Boylan Knitworks, and I am just in love with the stitch definition. So I'm again knitting this pretty loose because I know it's going to fill in all these spaces, but it's so silky soft. You can see that delightful like halo on it. Just so silky soft, really quite nice. It's been just a joy to knit with. If I make a mistake, because we all do, I could simply back up and not have a problem with it. I tend to be a low contrast kind of gal. I usually would have done this in a dark gray and a light gray, but this time I decided I'm going to go with the white and really make those halibuts kapow in your face. Yeah, so this has been a fun knit with the Icelandic blend yarn. So that's a little bit about our farm. It's a lot about fiber, and I'm always working on something here in the mill. I've got new fiber right now on the spinner that I'm making for my friend. I've got some new fiber on the roving deck right here that I'm also making for some fiber shows that I'll be at out west or out east. Yeah, this one's going out east. I have other things for out west. So this stuff is going to go with me out east in the summer. And so I'm always creating something new. And I'm really excited to tell you guys all about those creations whenever I get around to doing a vlog. Yay!